Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we are diving headfirst into an incredibly cool universe where lit RPG mechanics basically collide with hard sci-fi physics. We're going to be exploring Halo of Infinite Code, and we're looking specifically at how a seriously traumatized protagonist essentially jailbreaks the magic system of reality itself. I mean, we're talking about someone treating the fundamental laws of physics not as absolute truths, but just as messy code that is waiting to be rewritten. Here's what we're going to cover today. First, we'll establish the Zenith Empire, then dig into the rules of cultivation ranks. From there, we'll explore the birth of a cybermind, how exactly he goes about hacking the magic system, and finally, forging the infinite Halo. Let's get right into it.
Part 1, the Zenith Empire. We've got to set the baseline here.
So, to understand this universe, we really have to start with the world our protagonist awakens in, which is called the Blue Planet. And its history is just sheer brutality. Think about this. 500 years ago, a literal mana apocalypse wipes out 80% of humanity. It just turns their bodies into energy to transform the entire planet. Naturally, all this fresh, tasty mana attracts otherworldly predators. First demons, then vampires. Humanity was pushed to the absolute brink of extinction until a hero named Adam Zenith managed to form a pact with the Dragon King to secure one small continent. And even then, the arrival of mindless demonic beasts eventually forced all humans to hide behind a massive Great Wall. It really sets the stage for why humans are currently sitting right at the absolute bottom of the food chain here.
Now, at the top of that food chain, you have these deeply entrenched factions that completely control the Zenith continent. You've got the Zenith royal family, led by King Rudis Zenith, and they're protected by the Royal Guardians and the Royal Dragon Veldora. Underneath them are 12 immensely powerful city lords, plus this independent but sort of cooperative Hunter Guild. And the thing you have to understand is that all of these powerful figures operate under a very strict, mathematically rigid magic system that governs literally every living being.
Which brings us to Part 2, Rules of Cultivation Ranks, or, as I like to think of it, the math of magic.
Just think about how incredibly rigid the prerequisites are if you actually want to survive in this world. To move from just F rank up to E rank, it's not enough to just grind out 50 to 100 attribute points. You physically have to acquire a corresponding E rank skill or ability to level up. But the really crucial thing to notice here is this massive bottleneck right at the transcendent rank. Getting to this stage means a cultivator has to literally evolve past human limits, entirely transcend the very concept of attributes, and forge an origin inside their own body to mimic nature. It is ridiculously hard.
And there's a really stark contrast between the two main paths to get that power. Skills are learned, right? And they rely heavily on external environmental mana, like, casting a basic fireball. Innate abilities, on the other hand, awaken straight from your genetics and run strictly on your internal soul energy. Because of that, they are incredibly difficult to evolve. Definitely keep this difference between external and internal fuel in the back of your mind, because it ends up becoming the ultimate exploit when our protagonist decides to break these exact rules.
All right, Part 3, Birth of a Cyber Mind. This is the origin of our rule breaker.
To truly grasp how the system gets hacked later on, we actually have to step away from the Blue Planet and look back at Earth, specifically to the absolute nightmare that was Laboratory 47635. 1,000, that is exactly how many innocent children were subjected to extreme psychological torture, emotional manipulation, and a deadly White Room starvation experiment. These scientists were basically trying to build the ultimate biological supercomputer because, nothing says sound scientific method like traumatizing 1,000 kids with an alien meteorite serum. They were desperately trying to merge the 100% accuracy and calculation speed of a machine right into a human consciousness.
And out of all those 1,000 kids, subject ZX4775 was the solitary survivor of the trials. He endured this unimaginable physical agony as the serum literally shredded his neurons, only for his body to ultimately die anyway, leaving his pure consciousness trapped entirely alone in a timeless pitch-dark void.
Floating in that void, without a body, without senses, he literally counted to the quadrillions. To keep from going totally insane, he performed what he called binary encoding consciousness. He basically converted his entire memory and every thought process into purely numerical data. It's a wild concept, but this right here is exactly why Asgard becomes so unbelievably overpowered. By the time he finally reincarnates into a dead body over on the Blue Planet and takes a genetic awakening serum, his mind is already an impossibly perfect, emotionless supercomputer before the game even really begins.
Moving to Part 4, Hacking the Magic System.
let's talk about debugging reality. So how exactly does a supercomputer mind treat the universe like a sandbox video game? Well, because his consciousness is fully numerical, his awakening grants him abilities that honestly shouldn't even exist. He gets this limitless numeric consciousness and these numeric eyes. So he sees the world's magic, random objects, and even people not as mystical forces, but purely as code, just floating variables. And through this, he unlocks authorities. This is the absolute power to instantly save data to his internal codex, absorb physical matter by turning it into data, or literally just delete things from existence entirely.
And how does this actually apply when he gets into a fight? It's mind-blowing. Instead of chanting some traditional magic spell to make a bomb, Askar is doing real-time nuclear physics in his head. He alters the atomic composition of the air, uses vector acceleration to strip away electrons and create a God particle, forces nuclear fusion, and then just detonates it. He is literally treating atomic structures like lines of code to generate his magical attacks.
But what happens when he bumps up against universal rules he can't outright break? Like, the basic formula for distance, speed, and time. Well, when analyzing his null acceleration ability, Askar mathematically proves that distance actually cannot be ignored. You can't just magically teleport out of nowhere. Instead, null acceleration does something crazier. It splits time. External time flows normally, but Askar gets an infinite pocket of your time. So here is the exploit. Speed becomes completely irrelevant. He could cross an entire ocean at a turtle's pace over 13 subjective years. To the outside world, he appears to teleport instantly, but the reality is he's actually aging internally. He just hacked the physics formula by making his available time a limitless variable.
Now, of course, reality does not like being hacked. It's incredibly satisfying watching the universe's system basically throw error codes at Askar as he does this. Every time he forces the system to combine totally incompatible authorities, like fusing his physical magic threads with his literal delete authority, the universe slaps him with the title Rule Breaker. But it comes at a pretty horrific cost. The universe demands a sacrifice whenever you bend its laws, and Askar constantly has to pay up by sacrificing decades of his own lifespan.
Which leads us to our final section, Part 5, Forging the Infinite Halo, the ultimate rewrite.
Realizing that his lifespan is just draining away from all these crazy rule breaks, Askar knows he desperately needs absolute power that doesn't rely on the universe's rules at all. So he enters a simulated trial of eternal silence inside his own soul space for 100 subjective years just to perfect his willpower. He's inside a pitch-black void with no food, no sound, and no abilities. He goes to the absolute brink of madness. After decades of basically self-mutilation just to feel alive, he is struck by this really profound question. Why am I so afraid of dying? He realizes that life and death are just two sides of the exact same coin. To survive, he can't rely on external systems or standard cultivation paths or replicated nature anymore. He has to rely 100% on himself.
Armed with that realization, Askar decides to design his own origin from scratch. Traditional cultivators, remember, they mimic the universe by creating little domains inside their bodies. But Askar, he uses string theory. And instead of the universe's baseline strings, he replaces them with his own numerical data. He creates the halo of infinite code, a reality-negating construct where he is essentially the sole administrator user. He's no longer replicating reality. He is creating a true, independent nature, starting from the absolute smallest fundamental unit of data.
When you stack up traditional cultivation right next to the infinite halo, the ultimate hack just becomes incredibly obvious. Traditional cultivation relies on environmental mana and merely replicating existing natural laws that are still totally subject to the universe's physics. But Askar's halo, it relies solely on his own limitless soul energy. It's driven entirely by data absorption and gives him absolute authority. We are talking literal reality negation here. He completely bypasses that massive transcendent rank bottleneck by establishing a system that just negates the very foundation of the reality he's living in.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer on this wildly fascinating universe. Askar's journey going from a tortured laboratory experiment to a reality-hacking powerhouse is just this brilliant blend of math, physics, and sheer unfiltered willpower. It leaves us with a fascinating and honestly slightly terrifying thought about the true nature of reality and absolute power. I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts on this. If you possessed a cybermind capable of seeing our universe as code, what is the very first physical law you would choose to hit delete on? Think about it. Thanks for joining me, and keep exploring.